to be talking to. Thank you. We're going to hand over to Jack now, who is going to give us a presentation on using the .NET integrations in UiPath to get a repeatable, simple way of handling JSON. If you give us a second, we just need to adjust our microphones.
Okay, thank you very much. So hopefully I don't get heckled too much by the automated voice. Yes, the talk, as Graham said, is about leveraging the UiPath integration to build JSON entities. So here's here's a sort of overview about what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to start by giving you a little context, explaining the problem that we're trying to solve. Then, to make sure that we're all on the same page, I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of JSON itself, sort of explain the syntax and the design of JSON. Then I'm going to show you a couple of examples of building JSON entities using UiPath Activities, just using the sort of bog standard out-of-the-box activities. We're then going to discuss some of the problems with this approach. And then we're going to introduce the .NET integration and see how we can sort of improve upon the out-of-the-box method. I'm then going to present a caveat to this improved approach. And then going further, we're going to see some of the next steps we can take, other .NET integration tricks we can exploit with not just sending JSON, but also receiving it. And I'm going to have a brief recap, and then we'll have a quiz on some of the things that I've spoken about tonight. So, without further ado, so our automations need to interact with lots of different applications and systems, typically through the graphical user interface. Remember, the point of RPA is for software robots to mimic the actions of human users. So UiPath, fortunately, has a very sophisticated UI detection system in the form of selectors and the UI element explorer. But this may not always be 100% reliable. The fact is that our automations are at the mercy of the applications that they interact with. So if you are automating a website using selectors, if the HTML structure of the website is changed, your automations are quite likely to break. Similarly, if a thick client is updated and icons have been moved or labels have been changed, your automations are likely to break. So the alternative to interacting with graphical interfaces is to use an API, and it's sort of common knowledge, but it's no lie to say that APIs are always preferable to graphical user interfaces. They're faster, they're much more reliable, and it's scalable, and you have better performance. Major architectural styles of API are SOAP, which stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. SOAP APIs typically use XML to send and receive requests. Another sort of major architecture is REST, which stands for Representational State Transfer, and typically uses JSON to communicate. And it's REST APIs that we're kind of geared towards tonight when talking about JSON. So REST requests can be complex, as in what that's to say is that JSON structures can be very complex, can be very deeply nested, or with lots of properties that we need to send. So it can be difficult to construct these using the out-of-the-box UiPath activities, but as we'll see, this needn't be the case. So JSON, very briefly. JSON stands for it's JavaScript object notation. It's borrowed from JavaScript. The syntax and design of this, I guess, formatted text is borrowed from JavaScript. It's got 6 core structures. It's very simple. It's got objects, which are denoted by curly braces. It's got arrays, which are denoted by square brackets. It's got strings. It's got numbers. It's got the literal values true and false, and it's got the literal null. Some key points. Objects are made up of key value pairs, which in JavaScript land are called properties. And arrays can contain any of the structures any of the other structures, but cannot contain key value pairs. And for sort of very technical people, arrays are what's called non-homogeneous, which means that an array can hold objects and strings and numbers. It's not like in sort of classical programming, where an array can only hold one kind of thing, say strings or numbers. So if we consider this example, this is a sort of this is a request, a put request for an HR platform, for the API of an HR platform. So you can see this request has it's got 10 properties. We've got some sort of date time information, mobile numbers, emails, names, IDs, title, job title, and city. Pretty standard stuff. So we can construct this JSON object in UiPath. It would look something like this. And that's readable. I can actually switch to Studio and demonstrate something actually. Oh, you can see that JSON. Right. So this is a little workflow that I've put together. So just to explain this, this is a utility workflow. This just reads, I have an Excel sheet here, which has some mock data for some employees that we need to add to our HR platforms through API calls. So what this does is it reads the Excel file and turns it into a data table, which we can then consume on a row by row basis, which is what we do here. And then this is where we actually create the JSON object, JSON representation of our data row, and then send it to the API. So I can actually show you that. So we create the top level JObject here, and then we go through and we add all the properties. So if we go back to the, yep. So we're going to have to add the created app property and then the value that we want, first name, manager ID, last name, and so on. So that's what we do here. And at the very bottom, in this case, we just write it to line, but in actual fact, you would send it to an API. So I can actually show you this running. Oh. So it's just going through at the moment and reading the Excel file. And then it's going to start constructing our JSON, which you can just see clearly. And there you go, that's the written out JSON object that we've created. So if I just take a second. So there you can see it's just stepping through lots of invoke method activities and adding each property to the top level JSON object. So that is not so bad in that case, because there's only 10 properties to add. But it's not ideal. As I said, that case isn't bad because there's not much to do. There's no nesting. The JSON entity is very flat. It only has 10 properties, 10 keys and 10 values. There is a little bit of work we need to do around copying and pasting our invoke methods and changing the parameters, because the parameters correspond to the keys and values that we're adding. And there's perhaps a little bit of formatting we need to do for the date time property. So it's not so bad, but things can get a lot worse. Here's a more sort of real life example. This, as you can see, has a few levels of nesting. We've got, again, our top level JSON object. We've got sort of first level keys, it's keys and values, and then we've got a key that points to an array. So that's a first level of nesting. Then we've got another key that points to an array, inside which there are 3 objects and then strings. So this is going to require a little bit of thought, but we can do it. So if I go back here and show you this one. So to try and make this as readable as possible, I've actually split it up into a few different workflows. So start by creating the top level object, JSON object. Then what I do here is I assign the execution ID, which is this string here. And then I assign the running time value, which is that. And then to make things a bit easier, I've split off the work to create the first JSON array and then the second JSON array with all the objects. So if you go back to the slides, the first JSON array that we have to create is this one here. It's supported CPU targets. So we create supported CPU targets. We create the top level JSON array. Then we add the ARM, the string ARM, and then the string Intel, and then the string AMD, and then we pass it back out. Or in this case, it's an in-out argument. The top level JSON object is an in-out argument. So we just add it. So that's not bad. The second one is kind of where the killer comes. Again, create the top level JSON array, and then this is where I've added the workflows to add the individual objects. So the objects we need to create are this one here, CPU type ARM, with these values, these keys and values. Same again for the Intel one, same again for the AMD. So this is the here. So this is the first one I've created. This is the ARM JSON object. So just passing in the values as arguments, and then assigning it to the top level G array. And then I do the same for the Intel and the same for the AMD. And then I add the ARM, Intel, and AMD. Then I add them to the JSON array. And then at the bottom is where I add the Windows, Mac, and Debian strings, which you can see just here. Add them at the end. So, and then we just write it to a line, and I can actually, I think, show you this running. So we just go through. There's a lot, as you can no doubt see, a lot of copying and pasting, and same workflows again put into the solution with different argument values to create our different objects. And there you go. And this is the JSON entity that we've made, the JSON object that we've made. So there are a few problems with this approach. The first one being workflow collision. As I said, we've got lots of almost exact duplicates of a single activity. So as you've seen there, we had lots of invoked codes, lots of invoked methods, lots of assign activities that are almost exactly the same, but just have different parameters. The upshot of that is we have reduced readability. There's a non-standard way. We have to use a non-standard way of differentiating between our activities. So how do we know what key and value we're adding? Do we label them with comments, or do we use annotations, or do we rename the activities, the display names? And again, with this copying and pasting, we're very likely to make a mistake if further down the line during development, additional properties are needed for our JSON. So as I've sort of outlined there, to deal with that, if we had to add more things to our JSON, we'd have to copy one of the already existing activities, paste it, relabel it, and then change the arguments to the values that we actually need for the properties that we're adding. So the solution that I propose to this is to use invoke code, more specifically to use a CSharp feature called dynamic. CSharp has a keyword dynamic, which basically forces the compiler to bypass compile time checks, so that the checks on our code are done at runtime. The advantages of this are, aside from reducing all of the out-of-the-box activities that we had before, they can all be reduced into a single invoke code. We can also add properties to our JSON object in a manner which is much more similar to JavaScript, and you probably see why that's an advantage in a minute. And basically, the main advantage being that it's a nicer syntax and it's very readable to see what we're doing. And yeah, we no longer have any untidiness. As I said, we've got a single invoke code activity compared to dozens of standard sort of assign invoke method activities. So if I go back to the first example, it's seen, which is just a second, this one. I'm going to show you how you would re-implement this using the invoke method approach. So let's do that. So I can probably show them step by step actually. So this is the old way that we had. And then this is the new way. So again, we create our new top level JSON object. And then what I do in this case is I pass it in as an argument. So this invoke code. And then this is the code itself. Okay, so we, in this case, I define a temporary JSON object variable called temp.jobject, and I need to declare it as dynamic. And what this tells the compiler to do is to, as I said, bypass the compile time checks. So this object isn't checked when your code is compiled, it's instead checked when it's running. The advantage of that is I get to add my properties using this dot syntax. I can see dot and then the property name, dot first name, dot last name with the values that I want to add, which is, I would say, much better than the old way, which was to use an invoke method with the calling the add function and then pass my data in as arguments, like so. Instead of doing that, I can do it using this much cleaner JavaScript style syntax. In fact, here's a kind of comparison between the JavaScript way of constructing objects and a C# way. So this is the second example that we're seeing. So on the left, you can see the JavaScript version is almost exactly the same as just standard JSON, except we need to have a variable declaration, which is the let at the very top. But the rest is exactly the same as the JSON. And in the C#, there's a little bit more sort of ceremony. We have to use, as I said, dynamic, and then we have to instantiate these JObject variables using the new, the same again for the array. But you can see the similarities. It is very similar, and that I think is to our advantage, because the syntax design is very clean, very readable. So for those of you who maybe don't use C# all the time and mostly use VB.NET, VB.NET does not have a dynamic keyword equivalent. It does have various, I think they're called like compiler directives or something like that. One of which is option strict off. That is the kind of VB.NET equivalent to dynamic. It again tells the compiler to bypass the compile time checks. UiPath has option strict on by default, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't a way to turn it off. That's not a big deal though. You can still reap the benefits of invoke code. You just can't construct your JSON in a JavaScript style way. You have to use the add function. You can't use the dot and then property name sort of syntax. So a little caveat to constructing JSON using dynamic. Some property names have to be added using the add function. There are rules around what properties can and can't be added. Basically, if you have property names that contain non-alphanumeric characters or the underscore, so in other words, if you've got a property name that has a dash in it or a question mark, they must be added with the add function. The compiler will complain if you try and add them with dynamic. So to sort of take things a little bit further, we've discussed leveraging the .NET integration to build JSON when we're sending requests. But what about if we were receiving responses from APIs, REST APIs in particular? It's often the case that REST API responses, JSON responses, are very nested, can be extremely nested, and it can be very difficult to get the data out from the response that you want. But fortunately, again, we can exploit the .NET integration to our advantage in this case. what we'll use instead, we won't use dynamic, but we will use another .NET language feature called LINQ. LINQ stands for Language Integrated Native Query, and the long story short is it allows us to query data structures in a very uniform way. In fact, it's almost like writing an SQL query. So we can query data structures in a very sort of SQL database query style, which is to our advantage. Again, it's extremely readable, and you can compact, once again, lots of activities into a single LINQ query. But that's just scratching the surface. I'm afraid that's a story for another time. And I think, there we go, the recap. So to briefly recap, as I've said, using an API is always preferable to interacting with a graphical interface, as I've said, in terms of speed and reliability. JSON properties, constructing JSON in UiPath doesn't need to be difficult, although it can appear that way in the face of it. It doesn't need to be the case, and in fact, it shouldn't be the case. We can add JSON properties using the standard. Adding JSON properties using the standard activities, as you've no doubt seen, is cumbersome and leads to sort of unmaintainable, unreadable workflows and unscalable, I would say. So it's important to replace these activities with a single invoke code, or a few if it needs to be the case, but replace them with invoke code. That's the kind of punchline. Yeah, the dynamic keyword for C# at least is how we bypass the static checks, and it allows us to construct our JSON in a JavaScript style manner. But there are some caveats. Otherwise, the main caveat being you need to be careful when naming your properties. You can only contain alphanumeric characters and the underscore character. Anything else, you will need to call the add function. And I think that is us. So it's on to the quiz.
Yes. No, wait a bit. We can start the quiz now. So I'm going to first share a link in the chat for everyone to join. So you guys go to www.menti.com. And you can join from mobile as well, it's easier. And I'm going to give you a code. And with this code, you can enter into the quiz room. It's very easy. So just go to www.menti.com and copy paste the code you have in chat now. And I'm going to wait to see how many people join the quiz room. So let's go. Let me see. Okay, we're still waiting for players. Okay. Nobody wants to join the quiz room, or it's okay. They started joining.
Yeah,
so it's very okay. So we have 17 in the meetup now in Zoom. Let's get at least 10 in the quiz room from the 17 people. The questions, I hope they're not so hard. So I'm not the one to say much about that, but Jack and Graham prepared the questions. So if they are too hard, you can just tell them. We're going to have 5 questions tonight. And the prize, of course, is going to be a UiPath voucher to our swag store. So you can get a branded UiPath hoodie or t-shirts. Okay, we have 6, 7. So remember, it's actually easier to join from mobile. If you want, you can join from mobile without any problems. Anyone else who is unable to join or having problems? You can tell us in chat. I mean, any question you have or any problem you have, you can tell us in chat throughout the meetup, and we will either stop and answer or we will support you. Okay. 9. Let's make it a 10. One more.
I'd like to help you out, Christina, but I can't join. I know the answers.
No, no, no.
Only because I read Jack's answers. I couldn't have framed them.
Let's not know. Just the people in the audience.
Yeah.
Come on, one more person to join the quiz room. Who else is not in the quiz room? And
Just a reminder, if you're looking for it, it's in the chat here if you're looking for how to find it.
Yes, it's www.menti.com, and the code is 12884806. Okay, we're going to start if no one else cares to join at this moment. Oh, okay, we have a truck. Thank you for joining. Okay, remember with Menti, it's the points are for correct answers, but Menti also will give you points for answering fast. So whoever gives the correct answer and is the fastest in answering will be the winner. And the leaderboard you will see after each question, it switches until the end. So we lost with just one person dropped. Okay, the rows came back. So we're going to start now. And remember, yes, answer fast to get more points. So first question, does JSON treat the number 256 differently from 3.14? Okay, so we have a perfect half of correct and incorrect answers and no one for option 3. Let's see the leaderboard now. Who was the fastest in answering correct? Okay, Ross, the penguin icon is the fastest. So thank you, Ross. But remember, this leaderboard usually changes after every question. So all of you still have big chances. Okay. Let's go to the next one, question 2. What does dynamic actually do? Okay, this time we have a majority of correct answers. Let's see the leaderboard. Okay, so it looks like Ross managed to keep his position. And I think we have the same persons at least in the second spot. Next question. What is the VB.NET equivalent to dynamic in C hashtag? I'm not a programmer, I might get this wrong. Okay. So here we have only one incorrect answer. Most of you got it right. Okay, they're getting very, very close, Ross and Danny, only a few points away. Which of these is not a valid JSON array? This looks impossible to read. Okay, so only one person had the correct answer. Do you want to comment anything on this, Graham?
I don't understand either. So Jack.
Jack?
Yes, basically, all the ones that the one that isn't valid obviously is the last one because it contains key value pairs, which arrays can't. It's only objects that contain key value pairs.
Okay. Okay. Yes. When we see this, like many people who got it wrong, it's important to explain.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a tough one.
Yeah. Seems so. Okay. Akanksha got it right. And is now leading. And we have the last question, and let's see, I think it's a battle between Ross and Akanksha this time. Or who knows? Which of these is not an advantage of using invoke code? Okay, so we have half and half again. It makes workflows execute faster. Let's see the leaderboard, the final leaderboard. So this will determine our winner for this evening. Okay, it seems like it's Akanksha. Yes, it's not the first time winning in our meetups. Congratulations. Akanksha, you know what to do. I think DM me your email address, please, so you can get the winner's voucher, and congratulations. And also honorable mentions for Ross and Danny, please, from everyone. I think they deserve it.